Okay, we are now streaming. Welcome to the working session of the Avon Grove Charter School. We will begin. This is January 19th, 2021. Thank goodness we're in 2021. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if everyone could recite that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now if you would recite the mission statement: to inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. Thank you. Sarah, would you do the roll call, please?
For Ken, Dwayne Degler.
Here.
Eugene Steger.
Here.
Stacy Barno.
Here.
Rob Rainier.
Here.
Colleen Preston.
Here.
Deji Akintoy.
Here.
Brian Ladman.
Here.
Kristen Smith.
Here.
Michelle McCrae.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. As I said before, we're going to have an executive session at 7, so we're going to keep this to about 45 minutes. So guidelines for public comment, Mr. Bruto?
There's only one comment for tonight, and it's not applicable to the work session, so I'll read it during the board meeting.
Thank you. All right, and we're going to move on to head of school 2021-2022 academic calendar, Mr. Bruto.
So it's that time already to start to talk about the calendar for next school year. These are three. I sent out and attached to board docs 3 draft calendars that we discussed briefly at our strategic planning meeting 2 weeks ago. And I actually met with Quest today and got some additional feedback from this teaching staff about the 3 drafts. So really from a timeline perspective was bringing it up just for, open discussion this evening, and then giving a month to kind of mull things over and ask any additional questions or make any additional tweaks that might be requested, and hopefully bring up for a board vote in the February meeting. So again, tonight's just a discussion and to kind of look at the 3 drafts. Quest actually brought up some good points this afternoon to potentially do a 4th draft based on their feedback. But I'll try to go through this quickly because I know that we have to end by 7. So the first calendar draft, version 1, is the draft calendar that's closest to Avon Grove School District. So if we remember last year or 2 years ago, Avon Grove School District passed 3 years of calendars because of their building project. Next year's calendar has the school district going back early and starting on August 23rd and actually ending prior to Memorial Day, and because they need a long summer to be able to move in and finish out building projects. So this draft calendar 1 was putting something together that would be close to Avon Grove School District of going back to 23rd of August, having off Yom Kippur of September 16th, our normal 4-day weekend over Labor Day. Election Day is an in-service day, having students have off the entire week of Thanksgiving, and then Monday and Tuesday being a mix of teacher in-service and conferences. A half day, the December 23rd, which is before break or the holiday break. A normal January with Martin Luther King and an in-service day off. President's Day in February. The same thing in March that we do in November with 2 full days students off and a mix of teacher in-service and parent-teacher conferences. In the past, we've run half days and then an additional in-service day, or have had days off, but we've typically had a teacher in-service day during the month of March. This kind of tackled both of those objectives of having parent-teacher conferences and in-service mixed together. Spring break, May is completely taken up by our testing window. And you can see that the Keystone testing window is pretty late and goes all the way up to Memorial Day weekend. And then we would actually be having our last student day on June 2nd and last teacher day on the 3rd. So from feedback that I've received so far, this is the calendar that most people said they didn't like, and really off the bat it was based on that going back the 23rd, that after this year teachers need a break, kids need a break, cutting down their summer wouldn't necessarily be the best thing for them to recharge their batteries after this year. And also from an operational standpoint, ending the year right during the Keystone window, trying to get through high school final exams and AP exams, holding graduation, getting in final grades, all in that tight window. It's not impossible, but it would be difficult to do. But on the table for discussion. The second draft calendar is more similar to what we've run in the past, with half days for conferences. So this had us going back on the 30th, which is our typical return date, and then having a 4-day week going into Labor Day, a 4-day week after the Labor Day holiday. And based on when Yom Kippur lands this year, we would actually have students would have 3 4-day weeks of school in a row because of the Yom Kippur in-service. I had an October in-service day on this calendar. We had done October in-services in the past. However, that was typically because teachers and students would go from Labor Day all the way to like Thanksgiving without a break. But with Yom Kippur falling on the 16th and then having another in-service on the 2nd, that might not necessarily be needed. Election Day on the 2nd. These 2 days before Thanksgiving break would be student half days with parent-teacher conferences in the evenings and afternoons. So instead of closing the building, we would have half days, and that would count as 2 days of school. December was the same. January was the same. February was the same. March, we had 2 half days and parent-teacher conferences on Wednesday, Thursday, with a teacher in service on Friday the 4th. So students would be off that day. April stayed the same, May stayed the same, and by having a mix of, by adding in the 11th in service, the 4th in service, and going back to school on the 30th of August as opposed to the 23rd, that put our last student day as Tuesday, June 7th, which is still, historically speaking, relatively early in the month of June. We always try to stay within the first 2 weeks of June, just because it then starts to get hot. Draft calendar 3 was very similar to 2. And the only changes are it dropped the October in-service, looking at that having an in-service on the 16th of September and then again on the 2nd of November, that it wasn't really needed in October. It brought back the full days off in November and March for teacher in-service and parent-teacher conferences. And that had us go towards to June 9th as the last student day. So again, still within that second week of June, but you know, that would be your latest end of the year. The one thing that Quest brought up, they said that they proposed doing, taking this calendar, doing full days off for students, and then parent-teacher conferences and in-service on the Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving, because that's typically when they see the highest volume of parent-teacher conference requests. And then doing half days in March on Wednesday, Thursday, with an in-service day on the 4th. So kind of morphing the 2 calendars together. And that would actually have us end student day on Wednesday, June 8th. So between variation 2, 3, and that additional 4th one, you're looking at the last day of school being either the 7th, 8th, or 9th of June. So it was kind of an in the middle. They said that the secondary teachers typically do not get a lot of parent teacher conferences in February or March when they hold them. It's more Kemblesville and our elementary teachers. But having 2 half days and then also an in-service day that we could potentially take some time to finish off conferences if need be, that they felt like that was a good compromise. And that also then got 2 days of school in as opposed to having 2 full days off for those conferences. So those are the 3 drafts. They're very similar. There's not much give in the year. When we're looking at trying to go back somewhere towards the end of August, and the goal is always get out as early as we can in June. So I'll just kind of open it up for any reflection, points, thoughts that I can take back to the team and take back to Quest, and then would have back out to the board sort of 1 to 2 things to consider before going into the February meeting.
So Brian, the goal is for them to vote at the February meeting. You've got through Quest, it went through strategic, it's going to the work session. So they would ask questions you can digest if you have questions through the month, but then with a board vote in February.
Correct. And that's really to try to give our parents, we've already started getting vacation requests for August and September next year of when school's going to start. So want to get that out as early to parents as we can so that everyone has enough time to plan accordingly.
I think that's fair. Rob, you turned your mic on. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so Brian, so would Schedule 4 be the most preferred by the teacher? I know that I have concerns, the parents don't want to go back too early. I get that. But what the teachers have been through this past year and a half, I want to make sure that it's highly influenced by what the teachers are asking at this point.
Sure, and I would after this go back to Quest as well, just to kind of, because they'll be able to talk to some more of their teachers. What I gathered from that conversation was we'd really like to start school on the 30th, while the 23rd, we always like trying to get out as early in June. Cutting the summer down probably isn't good for anybody in terms of recharging their batteries after this year. And then really looking at the 7th, 8th, or 9th, they were kind of like, it's all within a day or 2 of one another. I think they had a good discussion about what was really needed in the March, February conferences. And it was kind of a mixed bag. Like the elementary teachers get a lot more conferences than the high school teachers. So I think they came to a pretty good compromise in that if we have half days in March, we could probably get through the conferences okay, and full days off in November. And that allowed some wiggle room. It allowed us to have the in-service time that we needed. And it kind of split it down the middle where we would now be ending on June 8th as opposed to either the 9th or the 7th. So it was really kind of, pitching down the middle.
Right.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else have a question? Nope. Okay, so if everyone would take a look at those, and again, Brian will create the 4th one, which sounds to me like it's just, it is just a mix of full and half days off for the conferences, so it'll be the 8th instead of the 9th. So, like you said, 3 days to pick from there. And we'll look at that in February.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bruto, very much. Thank you. Moving on, Fair Funding Initiative and Response.
So we're going to talk about this at the board meeting, where I would like to just make a few announcements, but I thought.
I'm sorry, Kristen, do you need your slides up?
Yeah, if you want to pull them up, just so, because Jen Weaver's going to use them, but I'll refer to the slide that they'll see at the board meeting. So this is the slide that I have to announce at the board meeting, but it's really to talk about, we're headed to what we left off with before COVID as our biggest problem, which is fair funding in charter schools and legislation. And so during COVID last year, Donna and I presented to the PASBA Board Association for Public Schools, because there are committees meeting regarding some recommendations that they would make to the PSBA, and to make sure in Harrisburg that they're hearing us. There really isn't a lot of opportunity for us to get a word in edgewise in where we think fair funding should go. So we are working really hard in trying to make sure, as new legislators are being elected, that they're learning, where we are in fair funding and what our needs are in charter school funding. So we've had 2 resolutions approved where you asked for fair funding and not to cut money into charter schools. We did that in December, the December 15th meeting and the 19th meeting. We then had on January 14th, this recently, something happened where Coatesville posted an article in the Daily Local regarding Collegium and us, that Coatesville didn't have the money, that Collegium needed a $3 million payment, or they were going to be in trouble. So the board had to vote. But in that article, it talks a lot about accountability, that we don't have the same accountability as our public school counterparts, that the special ed funding is off. So there was a lot of misconception in all of that article. So Stacy, do you want to talk to them a little bit about that piece?
Sure. I'm sure you all read the article. It was similar to articles that have been written in the past that came out of Coatesville, basically just not being terribly clear and making general allegations that essentially the number of kids that are going to charter schools are the reason, and the money that follows them are the reason why Coatesville is struggling financially, and it has nothing to do with anything else, as Christine likes to point out, nothing to do with anything else that they're doing in Coatesville. It is purely a function of the money that follows the kids that go to the other charter schools. So in response to that, Kristen and I worked on an article. Kristen really wrote the bulk of it. Jack did work on it as well, some, although we decided to take a more executive director, CEO approach to the response rather than a litigator approach at this point, until the board decides that they're ready to unleash litigation counsel into the matter. So what you saw published, I believe did it go up Friday, Kristen?
It went up on Friday in the website, and then it was published on Sunday.
Okay. Was really a modified version of Kristen's initial draft. So really well done. Trying to correct some of the misinformation that was in the article to begin with, and also calling for fair funding and offering informational sessions, offering training, offering to put the word out so that the community can actually begin to understand the true facts about the funding for charter schools, as opposed to these short and confusing, and some would say misleading, allegations about how the funding is really hurting Coatesville School District and a windfall to the charter schools that receive it.
So, I mean, Collegium was at a place where they were going to be in real trouble if they didn't get that payment. And so that is huge. That was a huge thing that happened in this whole problem, because if they decided not to pay Collegium and Collegium had to shut the door, that would mean something to charter schools and to the 2,000 some kids that would have had to find schooling with teachers that aren't hired over at Collegium, nor do they have the supplies or anything ready to go for them. So this is not about charter schools having an extra set of cash because we're being overfunded. This is about charter schools that are trying to make ends meet because they're not getting paid what's owed to them to educate kids in their buildings. And so, trying to keep it separate about what they're trying to say, and along with what our hardships are right now, are really important. So, so we have that going on, and with that comes educating new legislators. So Donna has great relationships up in Harrisburg, and now that there's new legislators, we need to make new relationships. So our plan is to go up to Harrisburg to make some connections. We're working with the coalition. They're actually coming out to visit us next week. So that's really good. And we are reaching out to meeting opportunities. I did publish in that article that we would be having a town hall fair funding meeting. I'm looking to see if I can get some people involved for more neutral ground so that we can have real conversation around the problems. And so I'm trying to lock in some key players in that meeting before I announce the date, but I'm looking to have that hopefully sometime in February. So as soon as I lock down the date, I'll make sure that all of you know, but I do think it's important that other board meeting members of other districts come. I'm hoping we get some superintendents. I'm hoping we get charter schools. It would be great if we could have a real conversation around funding and what everybody's stand and what we think is fair to kids. But there's a lot going on around this. So the Stacey's on the call. If you have questions right now, we can talk about this more at length, so that I'm going to make these announcements at the board meeting, just so that the community understands what's going on and what we're doing in response to educate people and to have them see our perspective and really what's happening in our budget. But this is your time. If there's something else that you think we need to do, if you feel strongly and you want to go to Harrisburg with myself or Donna's going to go every time. I'm going to go with Donna as much as I can. But Donna really does have a strong experience with dealing and explaining budgets to legislators.
Hey, Kristen.
Yep.
Were you able to listen to the school board meeting last week? I know when we were talking on Friday, I think it was, you were going to sit down and listen to the recording. Did you have a chance to do that?
Yeah, I listened to bits and pieces. I didn't get to finish the whole thing. Were you looking for something in particular?
Well, so we pulled, in the article that was in the Daily Local, there was reference to a lawsuit that was filed by Collegium back at the end of last year, where there had been conferences held with the judge at the beginning of this month. There was an order entered staying everything pending the board meeting last week. And the board was then to decide whether or not to approve significant payments to Collegium at the meeting. So that I don't know that it was the full amount that was owed, but it was a significant amount.
5.3 million was approved. So the board approved it. Yeah, they approved it.
Okay, excellent. Because that was a key part to trying to figure out what their strategy was. Obviously, we're not in the litigation, so it's impossible for us to know for certain what conversations are happening between the parties or with the court where the litigation resides. But it seemed to me that it was pretty clear direction to Coatesville that they owed the money. And in fact, in the litigation and in the article, Coatesville acknowledged that they owed the money under the statute as it was currently written. So I think based on that, the court probably directed them to go back and approve the payments and then wait and see if they did. I'm pleased to hear that they did approve at least that amount. I don't know that that was the full amount that was outstanding, but
yeah, it passed 8-1. It passed 8-1. There was just one person who voted against it. So the board pretty much unanimously approved. I believe it was 5.3 was what I thought that it was. But yeah, it was a resolution and it was posted. So on several sites.
All right, I'll see if I can find it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions of Kristen or Stacy at this time? Okay. Well, we'll talk more about it. So thank you very much. That's keeping us updated on that. It's important. All right. Go ahead. Yeah, we're going to move on to summer learning opportunities.
Yeah. So, and the reason why we're jumping into this, just to kind of give you some, just some backing of why we're talking about this today. So obviously parents are getting anxious about how they're doing this school year and have they learned everything that they need to learn to go on to the next grade level. And there's been talk about this gap that's getting wider and how we're going to stop it and what we're going to do to give these kids what they need based on this school year. And so with that, we decided that we have to do things a little different. And I think what parents need to understand and what we're going to be educating parents on is that every kid is in the same ballpark. This isn't because your child struggled to read and now they're behind. This is about something that's happening to all kids. And so sometimes when we talk about what can we do? It's not just about for a small group. It's going to be about a whole population of kids to support them and help them through some of those needs. So this is our attempt of our first initiative that we would like to put in place because of COVID and what happened with COVID to support kids to make up some of those gaps they might see based on some of the ways they've learned this year. So go ahead, Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Kristen. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, we kind of put together this tentative plan because we wanted to put something a little more structured in place for summer learning, more than just your traditional summer work optional piece, but also give families some choice and some options, because we understand that everyone may not be comfortable with sending their kids to school or prefer or enjoy the virtual aspect of learning, but still want to keep their children's brains active over the summer. So our first look, the in-person model. So what we're looking to do is initially target our K-3 students, because we know how important it is for those early numeracy and early reading skills to continue over the summer months. So we're looking at a potential in-person summer camp. We're not going to call it summer school, but more of a summer camp with an academic focus on it, that would run 6 weeks. We're still going back and forth on the half versus full days, but it would be 4 days a week. A lot of it be contingent upon the amount of staff that we have to help us run this. We would focus and structure the day to make sure there was fun time, play time, build in some STEAM activities, but also have blocks of time for ELA and math. And in terms of programming, it would be a lot of what they're currently doing now. So we're not looking to, take first graders and say, okay, we're going to prepare you for second grade necessarily, but let's look at first graders and make sure that their first grade skills are strong and they're prepared to move into second grade. And again, some of our thoughts for that in-person piece is we would look at our students that we feel would need that ongoing support over the summer. So we're bouncing around the idea of an invite only to start, because we are going to have to contend with numbers of students, number of staff, and still make sure that we're adhering to our health and safety guidelines. So that would kind of be like more of your intense option. Then we move into the self-paced. So this would look more like your traditional summer work, but beefed up a little bit. We would build out Schoology courses for each grade level. And each week, open up or release a folder within Schoology that would have learning activities that students could do at home with minimal support from their families or caregivers. Again, these would be math, ELA, and some STEAM or STEM related lessons. And then we'd look at having some AGCS staff serve as check-in teachers throughout the week. So if students wanted to participate in these courses and maybe had some questions or needed some help with something, once or twice a week, we would have staff available at different times where parents and children could log in and answer their questions, get their questions addressed, excuse me. Then sort of your least intensive, I think the pop-up kind of serves a few purposes. It gets our name out in the community more, but also allows us to connect as a community in a safe way. So we're looking at doing pop-up events. We can look, I initially would like to see 2 events in each of our sending districts. So we would go out into the community. If libraries are open, we might be able to use those spaces, or parks, but announce like a week or so out saying, you know what, we're going to have a pop-up event for grades 3 to 5 at this location. Here's some of the guest teachers that are going to come and facilitate some fun lessons, but really geared towards a family event. Not so much, strictly academics, and not so much a babysitting service or anything like that, but just come as a family. AGCS staff members will facilitate activities, fun activities with you and your children. And then on top of that, we do want to look at bringing the farm camp back. We didn't do that last year just because of everything going on, but we think we can do this in a safe manner. And this is an amazing camp that I'm really proud to be a part of, because the staff has worked really hard to build this over the past several years. And I know a lot of kids in the K2 range really look forward to it every year. So we're looking to bring that back, I think the week of June 14th. Then the following week, looking at bringing Camp Invention back. We did hold that last year, but we did it all via Zoom. So we partner with Camp Invention, and they provide all the programming and resources. So they did a really nice job of anyone who signed up for the camp that was intended to be in person. They mailed all their materials home to their home addresses, and then we had two staff members facilitate the lessons along with myself over that week of camp. So we're looking to do something similar, or if we're allowed to do any sort of in-person, again, adhering to safety measures, we can look at that piece too. And then of course we have ESY, which is extended school year for our special education students. So that will continue like it has traditionally. We have had some conversations about high school students and looking at ESY and building in some sort of credit recovery if needed for kids who may not have passed their classes. So we're kind of ironing out those details, and a lot of that will be contingent upon how students do in the next few months in terms of their courses. So as you can see, we're trying to give some, I guess, more intense learning opportunities over the summer, but also some flexibility for parents and caregivers to keep the learning going over the summer that we're providing, and hope that people are on board.
We do know that the in-person remedial thing that we would like to have here at school is going to be hard to get teachers to come and facilitate and teach all summer for those 6 weeks. So we are looking at different ways to get maybe young teachers trained, colleges involved. We're looking at, and we are going to pay the teachers more than we've paid in the past for camps to motivate them to be a part of this camp. So that is part of the discussion. We surveyed the teachers to see if they'd be interested. So we're collecting that data as well to see where we are.
Yeah. And I think we have about 7 or 8 that are in, then or said they were willing to do it, and
Yeah.
probably another 10 that are interested. So I think that's a decent number for January. I know things change over the next few months, but I was really hopeful with those numbers.
And it really is looking at our benchmarking right now, which is for every school very different than we've ever seen. Obviously, we're seeing some deficits in our benchmarking. So we gotta help those kids, especially in these grades. And that's why we targeted ELC, because if we can get them young while they're struggling, hopefully that the results of that will help later. We do find that, 4th through 12th grade, when we're talking about high school deficiencies and credits, that's a summer school type of situation. It's harder to make up teaching kids in 1st grade how to read, and then what the aftermath of all of that is if we don't get those kids where they need to be.
Thank you, Kristen and Jen.
Is there any questions?
Yep. Any questions? Rob, go ahead.
Yep. So Kristen, I know it's early in the stages of planning, but have you gotten any type of sense from the parents, like who would want to participate, be able to participate, just so we know if the parents want, a lot of parents want this, we need to have obviously the teachers in place for in-person and all these other types. Is there any initial thoughts on this?
Well, we didn't want to advertise until we knew exactly, what kind of staff we had ready to go for this, because and a registration system and all of that. But what we really wanted to do is get the benchmarking finished and then go to the parents and say, we really need your kid to be a part of this in person. So it's not going to be necessarily that they're interested as much as we're interested with them coming to the in-person based on what we're seeing with the kids that are struggling. Part of the conversation has also been about, we're already getting some buzz about, do you think I need to retain my child because they're in kindergarten or 1st grade and they didn't have a typical year? And what they need to understand is, there's so much research that goes into retention and how we make up some of the learning that they need to do. And retention is not always the answer. We see the aftermath of that later in life. And so making sure they have this kind of situation. So we're doing retention and promotion plans where we can talk to the parents of kids that are struggling and say, listen, your student's struggling, but they don't need a whole nother year of the same grade. They need an intense in-person camp that we're going to offer you for free to come and get this service. So we're not even looking for that in-person to be something that we charge the parents. We're looking for that to be something that is extra that we're giving to them as something that their kids need.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're actually in the process, Rob, right now, collecting the data to find out which teachers would maybe recommend kids for retention in a typical year. And then if any parents brought it up in any conversations with teachers, we're just getting all that information now so we can have a handle on what parents might be thinking or staff might be thinking in terms of numbers.
Reach out to the teachers to identify those students that we feel that really need this service.
Well, we'll use that, Eugene, we'll use what the teachers, but really we're using the data too that we're collecting. We're doing benchmark data with the kids to see where they're falling in the goal setting. So we do have data to support the kids that we're identifying. It's not just random
Recommendation.
feedback from teachers.
Yeah, we take retention very seriously because it's not just like a magic wand that can catch kids up just an extra year, like Kristen said, of the same academics in a given year. A lot more has to go into it, and usually you want to find the root cause, right? Why kids aren't performing for whatever reason, and really address it. It's not so much the grade that they're placed in or not placed in.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Michelle. We have about 8 minutes before our executive session. Go ahead.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to say I think this is great. I really appreciate the schools being proactive and thinking about this year and any gaps that were caused, and already only halfway through this school year looking at this and how to address it. So I just wanted to say this is great. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. We're going to move on to policies. Donna?
Thank you, Dwayne. So hold on, if you can hold on 1 second. All right, so for our board consideration to approve, tonight we have 5 policies that have been distributed to the board. They have gone through legal review and we're looking for the board to approve these policies this evening. And that would be the policy 4009, which is investment of funds policy. Policy 4019, which is audit, 4025, procurement cards, 4011, which is purchases budgeted, and 4012, purchases not budgeted. Upon approval of these invoices, we would rescind the older AGC policies, and there are 4 of them. It would be the AGCS investment policies, the AGCS purchases budgeted policies, the AGCS purchases bidding policies and procedures, and the AGCS policy disqualification, suspension, or disbarment of bidders policy. So those are up for approval this evening. And for presentation, we have 1 board policy, policy 4024, taxable fringe benefits, that will be presented to the board for the 30-day review. And there are no policies that would need to be rescinded as the board considers this new policy. Currently in legal review, we have 4 policies. Policy 4009.1, finances, fiscal management, fund balance. Policy 4013, common trust policies. Policy 4016, payment of bills. And policy 4017, finances policies. So Stacy currently is reviewing those. And with the approval of those policies, there is one older AGCS policy that is recommended to be rescinded, and that is the payment of claims. So that's what we have for policies tonight.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to move along. Any other comments from the school directors or principals? No. All right, so if we have a motion to adjourn, that's our meeting for this evening for the working session. We will be back at 7:30 for the board meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Dwayne, Stacy Barnell, making motion to adjourn the board work session.
Thank you. And I saw Rob Rainier raise his hand for a second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you very much.